It's the Sports Peninsula podcast. Coming up, we continue our coverage of the 2023 NFL Draft prospect classes as we look at the defensive ends and edge rushers. This is perhaps the deepest prospect class in the 2023 draft. The Detroit Lions are very much in play for one of these prospects, and we'll talk about who may be in play on day one. Now here's your Sports Peninsula team. All right, welcome everybody to the Sports Peninsula podcast. My name is Dave Drzezinski. Drew, it is Saturday, March 4th, and a little delayed here in our cadence. We normally like to publish every Tuesday, but regular life calls and real life calls. I apologize, folks. I got sent out of town for a few days and had to take care of some business. But we're back at it today and introducing first to talk about the defensive end and edge prospects with me today is Coach Andy Shield, Marine City Mariners. Coach, how you doing today?
Drew, doing well. Dug out from the big late season winter storm and ready to talk about some edge rushers.
Yeah, and I got the Rothstein glasses back on because, as we all know, Sam Rothstein was a fine handicapper back in the day. Before he made it big in Vegas, that was his bread and butter, and that's what he went back to. So I got to keep him on. They help me see prospects and the world a lot better. But you know what, Coach, we're going to talk about these prospects coming up here and these edge rushers. And needless to say, when we talk about the Detroit Lions, we're talking about edge rushers, defensive ends, defensive tackles. But overall, before we jump into this, Coach, what in your view, what is the true need for the Lions for another edge rusher defensive end?
Well, obviously, you want somebody that's going to complement Aiden Hutchinson, who's going to add to the fray. He's going to be able to support and maybe be a little bit more of an edge setter and run defender that maybe James Houston is not quite in his forte. So we're looking probably at a body type player that's not dissimilar to Aiden Hutchinson. Something that could probably bump down inside and show some position versatility and play on the interior. So probably a little bit more of an edge version of Josh Paschal, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. And much like how the offense, I would say the offensive line is probably 2 years ahead of the D-line in terms of how it's being built up. But much like when the Lions were looking at the 7th spot and Penei Sewell fell to them, they took him and made that a good unit great. So now you draft Aiden Hutchinson, Paschal, like you said, and then you're using James Houston as an edge guy. Do you make a good unit great? I can't say we can call them a good unit yet, but what we saw at the second half of the season certainly was very good. What we saw in the first half was concerning. But you know what I see too, Coach, is Romeo Okwara going to be on this team after June 1st? I don't know. It depends. Will the Lions re-sign a John Kaminsky? I don't know. I certainly hope so. But yeah, there's need here. The Lions played a hell of a lot better in the second half of the season because they played a hell of a lot better up front. So if folks are asking, well, why would we draft another guy like that when we got Hutchinson? Look at the tape. And what did Coach Campbell say, right? The tape doesn't lie. The tape, that's where it's at. And that's where a lot of the evaluation comes from. And Coach, let's jump into it right now. You know, when we look at these prospects, we got to start with a gentleman out of Alabama, and that is Will Anderson, the junior. Talk about Will Anderson.
6'4", 243, probably more towards 250 nowadays. Highly celebrated and highly, highly productive player at the college level. 2-time All-American, 2-time Bronco Nagurski Award winner. And he won the Chuck Bednarik Award this past year. Those are awards given to supreme defensive performers. He's likely the number 1 overall pick to the Bears. The Bears have indicated that they're willing to look at trading out of the first pick. But really, they could really fortify their defense and get things on the upswing with Will Anderson Jr. He's aligned at the edge. He's aligned at the 3 and 4 technique defensive tackles. So he's scheme and position versatile. Obviously, he's a little light to spend a ton of time down with his hand in the ground inside the offensive tackle. But this is a guy that's comfortable both in a 2-point stance rushing and pinning his ears back in a 3-point stance. Relentless effort and physicality. Just a burst of energy off of the snap every play. He's a game changer in both run and pass facets. He handles himself equally in both. So this is a star caliber edge rusher, Drew, that attacks blockers with high impact physicality. He'll engage an offensive tackle and win, which puts him in the upper echelon in regards to the position group right then and there. He sets a great edge. He keeps great leverage, does not let things get outside of him with tremendous flow. He's a really good stunter and real good on blitzes, occupying blockers and creating alleys and spaces for blitzes to occur. He's got just great acceleration in his pass rush and races and arcs past offensive tackles with ease. Drew, Will Anderson Jr. is the real deal.
Yeah, let's take a look at Will Anderson Jr. real quick here, coach, in number 31 here, and you can just see he's
lean and rocked up. He's not a real massy big guy, but look at that right there. He came down and reduced and still came back over the top of the guard and made the play. I mean, that is not easy to do. That is not.
No, it's not. And when you talking about Anderson, we always talk about, everyone has their positives and their negatives or opportunities to improve, and the politically correct way to put it, right? This guy doesn't have a lot of buyer beware attached to him, does he?
No, the things that, would be pretty obvious. You wouldn't even have to see any clips. You just look at his measurables and see that he's a little bit light for, really being that interior edge setting, kind of rock anchor guy at 243. You're gonna and that's gonna go up. I mean, we know that he's gonna put on some mass and get a little bit bigger, but he's very reliant on his power and bull rush techniques. And he's gonna need to get a little more butt and legs behind him if he's gonna want to do that, because the pros are a little bit bigger and stronger even yet and play with that kind of technique. So he should probably develop a little bit more of a diverse pass rush repertoire. That would probably suit him well, and I'm sure that he will. So, I mean, that's about it. We're going to talk about some other great prospects that are going to have more, obvious areas of improvement. Will Anderson's ready to go.
He is, and barring a minor miracle, he will not be at number 6 for the Lions. He, like you said, he's likely a Chicago Bear, which is number 1 overall. The only way that doesn't happen in my mind, coach, is if the Bears somehow trade back a spot or two to a team that's quarterback needy. And that could happen. And quite frankly, they need to somehow create a bidding war between Houston, the Colts, and maybe the Panthers. And there's probably some other teams we could throw in there to try and get into that spot for the Bears to make it worth their while to move back. Houston obviously would be the easy one, because it would guarantee them Anderson at number 2, and it wouldn't cost Houston a tremendous capital just to move one spot to get their guy. I don't want to help a division rival, but that's what I would do.
Right. Well, and with the events that have, kind of unfolded this week in regards to Jalen Carter and his very serious legal situation, that would be the only caveat now, that I wonder if Chicago would be as willing to move down and say, well, if we lost out on Anderson, we would have, this superior defensive tackle prospect possibly there as well. And I'm not so sure that's going to be the case any longer. So, it really did kind of fix the top 5 prospects on most boards. And it probably makes Will Anderson that much more of a diamond now. But those are great scenarios, and they could get a lot of capital in doing so. But let's not help that divisional rival.
Nope, don't want to do that at all. But it is a scenario that could definitely take place and transpire. 100%. So we'll watch it closely. But let's talk about the next guy. And this is a stud too, Tyree Wilson, the senior out of Texas Tech. Coach, your thoughts on him?
Much bigger, kind of your traditional edge kind of run anchor body type, 6'6", 275, finished at Texas Tech. Started his career with the Aggies down in College Station at Texas A&M. Another guy that's shown scheme and position versatility throughout his career. He's played both and aligned both inside and outside the defense or offensive tackle. So he's played defensive tackle and defensive end. He's got great functional strength and he's very competitively strong, which is good. That's a guy that indicates he's ready for early reps in his NFL career.
Mm-hmm.
He can really stonewall in the run game. He can really lock in and anchor. And, he's an effective block shedder. He's got good long leverage arms for leverage. Really stout run defender throughout the Big 12 in his college career. Another guy that's superior technician in his power bull rush pass phase. He's very similar to Will Anderson, how he likes to rush the passer and what he's most comfortable in. Really, he's shown an unlimited power speed combo in a lot of his arsenal. Tyree Wilson is an intriguing prospect and somebody that he's going to be one of the candidates to probably replace Jalen Carter on most big boards.
Yeah, let's take a look at a clip of him real quick, Coach. And right there, just great power. Very
just an anchor. I mean, he was not to be moved. And there you see him, rushing off the edge there and arcing a little bit. So you saw two clips right there. You saw the finished product where he anchored in and reduced and stuffed the run. And then you saw him, shoot the outside hip and arc on that offensive tackle for a sack. He's got the complements to do both things. Very similar in many ways to Will Anderson in that regard, but bigger, much bigger body.
He, and that's what's wild about him in watching him and scouting him a bit, Coach. He looks more compact than he really is because he plays his pad levels fantastic. He plays with a nice low pad level and he's so strong. But there are some concerns, right, too.
Well, is he a defensive end or is he a defensive tackle? To maximize, I mean, this is a situation where Tyree Wilson needs to be maximized because he is legitimately, without injury, definitely a 5 to 10 year player at a fairly, dependable level at one of these positions. However, if he's at the edge and he ends up not possessing the dynamic abilities to really rush the passer with a more diverse repertoire, then we're looking at more of a defensive tackle, fish out of water at defensive end. His ability to hit home on the pass rush is a little bit of a question mark. He'll go a little dry at times and struggle in some of the, real good pass protections. He just doesn't quite hit home. That has been an issue. And he's produced more from the interior than he has when he's well outside the offensive tackle or even further wider, like a wide nine. So he's been more productive in the backfield, and he's been more productive as a statistical defender when he's aligned inside the offensive tackle, which would make him a defensive tackle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where the need to work on pad level is an issue more so when he's outside, because you like, to your point, he's more comfortable inside. And that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Personally, yeah, I would take Anderson over Wilson if I'm looking for specifically for a pass rush specialist. But I love Tyree Wilson's versatility on the line. Love his game against the run. If I'm the Lions, this guy's very much in play, and I'd be very, very happy if he's there at number 6. Not thinking he's gonna be, but he could be. But this is a very talented prospect, Coach, and totally agree with you on him. Let's take a look at the next one on the board, and this is Myles Murphy, the junior out of Clemson. And Coach, this is another talented guy out of an ACC school. Talk about him.
Very talented, very highly regarded player, Drew. 6'5", 275, third-year junior from Clemson. He was a big prospect out of high school, 5-star, top 10 player nationally. Again, just like we've talked about with Anderson and Wilson, scheme versatile, can align in different alignments and find ways to utilize his power and speed. Just the same type of players these two gentlemen that we've spoken about before are. He has outstanding hands, heavy punch, knows how to use his hands. He's got great grip strength. He's excellent at creating positive leverage angles for himself, so he understands the position. Very powerful edge setter. He's a good block shutter, can easily leverage into to being a tackler in the run plays. Phenomenal run defender, Drew.
He is, and let's take a quick look at a clip of Myles Murphy. And bottom line is he is dominant, like you said.
There he is, kind of playing off of that block right there. And you saw that shed ability right there. You see how quickly he shed that player on the inside and got to the passer. Here you see him finishing something up right there. Again, he's in great position. He didn't dive inside. He maintained leverage. So this is a kid that understands his position as well.
So, Coach, right now, I mean, in my mind, Murphy's probably the second best pass rush specialist in this draft, but there are some concerns. What are those?
Well, he in this, Brent Venables was gone this past, year. He went back to Oklahoma. So there's a little bit of a different defensive voice in Clemson, but he's been a little bit undisciplined in maintaining the contain principle, and that's keeping things inside you. He will dive inside and take the path of least resistance in order to try to shoot and race to the play. And oftentimes, that is not a football coach's direction. That's not a directive football coaches will give you too much. They want you keeping things inside so that ultimately the team defense can make the play. And he's gambled with house money and lost a little too much there. And that's something that needs to be corrected. He's not near the fluid mover that Anderson is. He's a little stiffer hipped. He's a guy that's got to use technique. He's not going to be able to recover with that elite athleticism that Will Anderson has demonstrated. He's more of a linear player. So, he's a little bit more limited when he's asked to redirect and do too many of those kinds of things. Yeah. So, Myles Murphy, for his physical and bursty as he can be and plays with great leverage and length when he wants to, he really needs to believe in those things, because those will be the things that carry him throughout what very well could be and should be a lengthy NFL career.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more, Coach. With Murphy, in terms of positioning, now Wilson and Murphy likely being drafted behind Anderson. The key for the Lions to have a shot at either of these guys is they're going to need a third quarterback, or possibly a wild card that climbs the board, that gets drafted above them, so that either Murphy or Wilson can follow them. That's how I'm seeing it now, Coach. But that if Myles Murphy's at 6, he's very much in play for the Lions. But again, probably not where Hutchinson was when we drafted him last year in terms of ready, but he's very close to that. He's a very good football player. Really like Myles Murphy a lot. But let's talk about the next guy on the board. And this guy's climbing the board courtesy. This is our first combine story, where of a success story, if you will. Nolan Smith, the senior out of Georgia. Coach, he impressed folks at the combine. Let's talk about him.
Well, you're absolutely right, Drew. He was the darling of his session at the combine. Just put on an absolute show. 4.3, 640, 41.5-inch vertical leap. All sorts of athleticism out of Nolan Smith, the 6'3", 235-pound senior out of Georgia. Now, he did not. He missed, I think, the playoff. He was hurt. He did not get to play the latter part of that season. But he really has asserted himself as a true dynamic leader and major team leader for Georgia for the 2022 and 2021 runs. So this is a locker room, warrior as well. He was a 5-star, just like most of the Georgia and Alabama prospects always seem to be. And he's an extremely physical player with outstanding effort. So he matches that ability, that freakish athletic ability, with tremendous effort. And if you have those two things combined, you're in good company.
Absolutely.
He has just relentless energy, both physical and emotional and mental energy. I mean, he's kind of almost like a Jamal Williams, but an edge player.
Let's take a look at Nolan Smith real quick, Coach. Got a clip of him, and actually we're having some technical difficulties, so I apologize for that. But Nolan Smith, like you said, he's awesome on tape, but man, he wowed everyone at the combine. He wasn't being mentioned this prominently before the combine. What are your thoughts on that, Coach?
Well, and just he, for his size, I mean, he's a little bigger than James Houston, but he's similar. He also sets a great edge. I mean, he uses great technique. Probably that's the size factor, Drew, is what really kind of got Nolan Smith, behind the three players that we had mentioned before. And he's a little unrefined in his pass rush techniques. He relies on physicality and ability a lot of the time. And that's going to be something that he's going to have to work on, especially being a little bit undersized. He can be a little sticky on blocks. And that's something that, the elite ones are great block shedders, and something that he needs to be able to improve upon as well. Very much a tweener in size. Is he more of an outside backer, or can he put on the mass to be on the interior the whole time, or on the edge of the interior the whole time? So he needs to be able to assert himself in that identity. But I tell you what, like I said, the events that have unfolded out of Athens, Georgia, negatively, and later, in the edge session of the combine positively, because Nolan Smith, really improved his standing, as you alluded to. This is a guy that's going to climb up those boards and could jump right up into the fold. His injury and lack of playing and why he was out, those are the concerns, because you don't want to draft somebody super, super high that's going to miss time regularly. But he really brings something to the table.
So I go back to, I think of Cliff Averill when I think of Nolan Smith a little bit, although Averill was about 15, 20 pounds heavier. And I, even then in my, being a younger guy, I was thinking, well, there's no way he can play DN. Well, Cliff Averill became a pretty solid DN as a third round pick. So I like Nolan Smith a lot. The Lions certainly could juice him, even if it is as an outside linebacker. That would be just fine. Thank you. I'm not sure number 6 is the spot for that. And I'm not sure he'll be there at 18. So that's the tricky part with Nolan Smith. Not sure 6 may be a bit high. And I say that not because he's not worthy of it, but because at that point, if you're talking Nolan Smith at 6, Anderson, Wilson, and Murphy are off the board. And oh, by the way, here's some fine cornerback prospects sitting there looking at you in the face too. So that's where it becomes more of a decision in my mind. If any of those top 3 guys are there, the decision gets a little easier to make from my perspective. But if it's those 3 guys are gone, it becomes difficult. But Nolan Smith's in the conversation. He's an outstanding football player. It's just a matter of, can the team that's drafting him figure out how to best utilize him? And to your point, Coach, let's keep him on the field and healthy too, right? So
yeah, and he'd be somebody that, like, at 18, that would be where you, if he was there at 18, he would definitely probably be in consideration.
Absolutely, no question about that. And let's go to the next guy, because here's another player that's climbing the boards, and he's very intriguing. That's Keion White, the senior out of Georgia Tech. Coach, your thoughts on Keion White?
Keion White is a big kid, 6'4", 287, out of Georgia Tech. Played at times at 290. Started his career out as a tight end at Old Dominion, but transferred down to Atlanta and became the team captain. He's an absolute physical specimen. I mean, that body type, his body type holding that weight, he does not look like he weighs 290 pounds.
Yeah, that's why we
Phenomenal.
got to at 267. That's Mike because he doesn't look that big.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, if you're looking a little further away, that you just by looking at him and reading it, that's at 87. That's 67. But he's just a phenomenal athlete for his size. He can play down or in a 2-point. He can play down with his hand on the ground or in a 2-point stance. He drives back and stonewalls blockers well. Very similar to Tyree Wilson in that capacity, and he can deepen and set edges. This is a very competent player.
Really like him a lot, Coach. And let's take a look at him right now. He's a strong kid, like you said. Look, I love
Look at him just drive block there. I mean, I think that's against Georgia State, but I mean, nonetheless, you saw that drive back right there. You saw that ability to drive, and that's like that power bull rush move. Keion White's pretty good at it.
He gets under his blocker, the guy in front of him, very well. Like you said, he get good strong grip, and he can do whatever he wants with him at that point. That's really liking him a lot. But there are some issues there, Coach, and what are those?
This is a very raw prospect. He's pretty new to the position. I mean, when he was up in Virginia at Old Dominion, he was a tight end. So, and he may very well have come to Georgia Tech as a tight end. I mean, we saw him, he wears the number 6. So that's not your prototypical defensive end's number. So he's got a lot to learn in regards to the technique and the position. And, and some of those things that go with that, his punch timing's a little late. The tackles engage him first far too often. And when that's the case, at the NFL level, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose that leverage battle. And because again, he's pretty raw. He's guilty of dipping inside and not maintaining the contain principle, letting things get outside of him. And those are the things that he's going to have to correct. And that's why Keion White's probably going to be a little bit further down the board than some of the prospects that we've just mentioned. Just a tremendous physical tools and ability to learn, but he's got a little bit of a learning curve to exhibit as well.
Yeah, so I gotta ask you, Coach, when is it easier to teach technique to a player who has the physical abilities there? You got to coach up the technique versus trying to teach a guy that maybe isn't as physically gifted, but maybe just football IQ out through the roof. I mean, what's easier for you in your experience to get technique down?
Most all coaches would rather work with the coachable player that is willing to learn, to grow, to develop, than the uber talent that just always is going to be right and knows all above any kind of coaching that he's going to receive. Those guys make plays. Those guys do their thing, but in the end, oftentimes will also cost you because they're not perfect. They're humans. Where the technician, like you alluded to, the maybe lesser athlete that is extremely coachable, understands the position more. And, we can talk about great athletes all day long. And obviously, their abilities are very apparent, but it's easier and better in the coach's mind to work with that technician than it is that freak athlete that's just going to freelance and do things their way.
And it makes sense. But what I like about Keion White is he's already demonstrated he can do those things. Mm-hmm. So if there's buyer beware in terms of, can he pick it up? Well, he managed to become a defensive end as opposed to a tight end, and he's done pretty good job with that. So yeah, I think Keion White may be all of the above, physically gifted and astute football IQ. And wow, at that point, you're only going to learn that through watching tape and through the interview process. You spend 3 or 4 hours in front of a whiteboard, right, Coach, and have folks drawing out plays and understanding assignments. You understand very quickly the football IQ of a lot of these guys. And I'm not hearing anything negative about Keion White in that regard. So,
no, obviously, and he's demonstrated some of that already by switching from tight end to defensive edge rusher.
Yeah,
defensive end, outside back, or whatever you want to call him. Defensive tackle on that size. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Very intriguing prospect. Day 2 guy. That very, very intriguing.
All right, let's talk about the next guy on the board. Not necessarily, but the next guy we're going to talk about is Derek Hall, the senior out of Auburn. And coach, there's a lot to like about Derek Hall. Let's talk about him.
Absolutely, and we could go on for hours in this position group, Drew, as you alluded to at the intro of the episode. I mean, there are so many players and prospects that we could really highlight and talk about. But with Derek Hall, 6'3", 251-pound senior, tremendous athlete. Again, he's got more of that Will Anderson size frame. But this is a Mississippi high school state finalist in the 200 meters in track. This is a young man that can run. He is a burner, explosive out of his stance, really can get off, which is going to be very, very beneficial to his pass rush repertoire. Has great leverage. People call them levers, real long arms that control blockers, which is he's kind of got a physical, even though he's 6'3", 251, he's kind of physically built for the position. Has excellent leverage principles and sets a real good edge. So he understands this is a high football IQ player, which we often see out of Auburn. Oftentimes, explosive setup. He really can set up his burst and get to the half-man leverage point, which means he can race to the hip, and basically an offensive tackle is no longer square with him and really only has one side of his body to leverage him where he has all of his. So Derek Hall is a player that really gets the position, Drew, and this is a young man that we can see move up the board.
Let's take a look at Derek Hall quickly here. And more technical difficulties. So we're not doing that. You'll have to take a look at us. Love Derek Hall. I think, when you're to me, he's like that 5-tool type guy. He just does everything well. And he's like you said, he's got locker room respect too. And this guy's a leader. Knowing the track background as well, that's impressive for a guy this size. So, obviously he wasn't that size when he was setting records at that point, but still that those traits are there. Really curious to see how he translates to the league. But coach, there are a couple of issues here. Let's talk about those. What are you seeing?
Well, he does have kind of an underdeveloped pass rush repertoire, which has been something that we've talked about throughout the prospects we've spoken about earlier as well. This is a guy that's going to develop a more diverse array of pass rush moves. He's limited in his hand skills in that regard. So that's something that he's going to have to work on right away. He is a little bit of, little stiffer in the hips and ankles than maybe we've talked about earlier. And that will be a concern because, that those are the guys that can rip through blocks, get underneath blocks, really bend and arc. We see James Houston as an absolute phenom when it comes to being a bendy pass rusher. Derek Hall might not quite be that. And he does not arc to the quarterback real well. Again, he really is dependent on the power bull pass rush moves. So, and he maintains great contain principle, but maybe too good of contain principle where he does not hit home a lot. So, those are some things with Derek Hall that don't make him the number one prospect in the edge in the edge class this year. But he's a very, very good one, and certainly one that's probably going on day 2.
Yeah, and this is one of those situations, Coach. When the lines are at 18, and again, everything's going to be contingent on what happens at 6. If a Murphy or Wilson's available there, the Lions are likely looking there, and then at 18. They're likely looking defensive backfield, possibly linebacker, but likely defensive backfield. So day 2 would make sense. If he's there at that first spot in the second round, I mean, he's very much in play, especially if they haven't addressed the position and jump at Derek Hall. I don't know if he will be there. But we'll see. But he's an intriguing guy. He's going to play right away. And if he develops over time with his pass rush techniques, to your point, he could become a real problem in the league for a lot of teams. So that would be fantastic for him. But Coach, let's talk about some other guys, and we wanted to talk about Lucas Van Ness, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't have a slide here, but do you want to get into him?
Well, like I said, we had to stop somewhere and,
Yeah.
and wrap up this episode. Lucas Van Ness is probably somebody that really could have a slide. He's a slide caliber prospect, so to speak. 6'5", 264. He's a sophomore. He's a third-year sophomore out of Iowa. He, again, he's kind of a baby Aiden Hutchinson. He's got a similar body type and a similar play style. Lucas Van Ness could really be a guy that jumps up and is likely a day one player, now. Felix Anudiki Azuma out of Kansas State, another player, very similar style to like Derek Hall, very similar style to Will Anderson, real strong prospect in that regard. Day two football player, maybe a guy that slides up in a day one himself. Tuli Tuiapulotu out of USC, more of a bigger bodied one. He's more of that anchor and edge to inside defensive end player out of USC, big physical run defender that can also get to the passer. He's going on day two. BJ Ojolari is another archy, bendy, fast blazer off the edge out of LSU. Highly competitive, player. A guy that's going to be high on a lot of people's boards. Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame, 6'5", 260. He's got that body type that you love. We've seen a lot of Notre Dame defenders and really linemen in general succeed at the NFL. The guy that really wowed people at the measurables is Zach Harrison, 6'6", 272 out of Ohio State. He is a big kid. He's not the fluid mover that a lot of the prospects that we've talked about are, but man, can he anchor an edge set. And that's going to be a skill set that is going to be regarded highly in the next level. KJ Henry, the defensive end opposite Miles Murphy at Clemson, 6'4", 260. He's a little bit more of the upfield archer that Miles Murphy really maybe didn't demonstrate as much of at Clemson. So that's going to intrigue. A guy that really is some people really have Andre Carter out of Army really high on their boards. And I mean, you can see why. 6'7", 260.
Mm-hmm.
He's a junior, so he's declaring early for the draft. I do not know how that works with folks in the service academies, if they're allowed to just leave and be done. I don't, that's not the past precedent, which means Andre Carter would have some service time to serve still. But he is somebody that really pops off the board. Our local guy is Mike Morris out of Michigan, and he is a big kid. He measured up probably similar to Zach Harrison. Doesn't maybe anchor as well as Zach Harrison, but a guy that really produced here at Michigan, was very successful, 6'6", 278. And then another guy that I think is going to be, I've seen a lot of variance on a lot of different boards. Some people have on day two, some people have like in the 6th round or later, and it's Isaiah McGuire out of Missouri, big 6'4", 272 pounder, who demonstrated a lot of high-level productivity down in Columbia, Missouri for the Tigers. So it's a stacked position group, Drew, as you said before. The Lions are going to draw from this position group. They definitely are. When it could be as early as 6, and it could be day 3. But I would expect that they really kind of target one of these individuals we mentioned, because this is really the cream of the crop of this group, which has a lot of other prospects that are going to get drafted as well.
Yeah. Morris put on a show on the bench yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
He did.
If I want to say 35 reps, but I could be off. I saw the clip this morning. I was like, yeah. Love him. Certainly a late day 2, day 3 guy, but this class is so deep. I believe the Lions address the defensive line on day 1. I'm not sure if it's going to depend on which edge prospect falls at 6, and that'll determine what they do. But I agree, Coach. They could easily come back and address this position yet again at any point. You mentioned Andre Carter, and he's interesting to me. And there's what's interesting is I've read a lot of scouts saying, well, he's a little light for his frame. That's because in the service academy, you cannot weigh above 275 pounds.
Yep.
You cannot serve in the U.S. military in any branch if you weigh over 275 pounds, which is why the service academies run very gimmicky offenses, and they also run the 3-3-5 defense, the rich rod defense, a lot, because
there's a lot of movement in it, and they defend with movement. Yeah,
exactly. You're on offense, it's zone blocking, RPO, and on defense, it's a lot of movement and stunting and zone blitzing to compensate for the lack of girth, if you will, because they can't have 330-pound offensive linemen or defensive tackles. They're not allowed to be there. I'm intrigued by him, but he's a bit of a project. So, that would definitely keep him out of day 1 and likely out of day 2. But if a team's, like a Chiefs or the Bills, teams that are very deep in talent, and they can take a flyer on somebody and wait a little bit, that would be a great pick in my mind. Foskey's kind of scares me a little bit, and I don't want to unfairly compare him, but I see Julian Okwara a lot, Coach, who the Lions drafted a couple years ago and just hasn't worked out. Similar body types. Your thoughts on Foskey? Because I'm intrigued by the athleticism and size, but then I get a little scared.
Julian Okwara is a player that really only exhibited outside leverage. I mean, he was like a wide 9 only. He's just lacked so much versatility. I mean, the closer you put him to the edge, he just got manhandled. He is not his brother in regards to physicality and maintaining leverage. I think Isaiah Foskey does that a little better. He is a little bit more of an anchor in that regard, but I think you're also right. I mean, Drew, he just his productivity. He does not make tons and tons of plays, and you can be a very good football player and not put up a ton of tackles or TFLs or sacks. If you play with, if you as a defensive end maintain great contain principle, things stay inside you, and you hurry quarterbacks or get quarterback hurries. That can be very, very productive. And that's kind of what Isaiah Foskey has demonstrated. So is he going to be able to do that at the NFL level? Time will tell. But there's a likelihood he'll be able to do at least that, which, Julian Okwara really, to his defense, was just never healthy. This game just kind of chewed him up and spit him out. And, hopefully Isaiah Foskey, for his sake, has a little bit of a more fortunate scenario that way.
Just to reiterate, though, Coach, this is a very deep class. You did a great job covering it. Appreciate that. It's for Lions fans, you should be excited. We're excited. The Lions are going to get somebody out of this group that's going to help. And we certainly know after the last 2 seasons, we can certainly trust Brad Holmes. He does have an eye for talent, as does Dan Campbell, his staff, Chris Spielman, in the gang. They're going to get good players. There's a plethora of them in this group, which is exciting. So it's a wait and see thing. I really can't wait to talk about the D tackles, Coach, and then we can really, really tie it in. That's going to be coming up soon, but that's going to be fun.
Absolutely. And I just think, with, the seeming fall from grace that Jalen Carter seems to be headed towards, definitely a defensive tackle, but I think this position group as well. I think it's going to move a lot of players up the list. I think it's going to move Nolan Smith considerably up the list. We had talked earlier in the week, and you had mentioned Lucas Van Ness. It's going to move him up the list. It's going to move the Derek Halls, the Keon Whites, further up the list, and probably into day 1, which means then, you look at the Isaiah Foskeys and those types of kids, the Isaiah McGuires, and they all are going to kind of, move up that board. But yeah, when we get to the defensive tackles, it's really going to be interesting because, that position group really, there's going to be some opportunities there now for some players that look a little different.
Totally agree with you. Well, folks, we're going to wrap this one up. We'll be talking about more prospect groups every week leading up to the NFL draft in late April. April 27th is day one. So for Coach Andy Shield, Marine City Mariners, my name is Drew. Take care, everybody, and thanks for listening and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments. Leave your comments. Let us know. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you want to see. We'll be more than happy to provide it. So take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.